Welcome, Kat. How
Hello.
are you?
Hello.
Hey, Kat.
I'm excited to be here. You
You.
guys have like the most fanciest setup.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. I mean, I'm sure you heard Gianni
Thank
say
you, Kat.
you guys are a different kind of Hispanic, so
Oh yes, there is a difference. There is a difference.
you're a different kind of Hispanic.
Thank you, right, Kat? There are different, and some Hispanics are very prideful to be that specific hit. Like I know that Puerto Ricans are very proud. I know Mexicans are very
Yeah.
proud, and I know Cubans are very like loud and proud. So
Okay,
there's,
well, what kind of Hispanic are you, Gianni?
Well, see, for me, I
I
was raised with. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no. Go ahead, Kat. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, for me, like my grandmother always told us, have you ever that you're Mexican American and that there's a difference. So, if you've ever seen the movie Selena, her dad tells her, "We're too white for the Mexicans, and we're too Mexican for the white people." Like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's really what it
That's
is.
how you feel.
She's, I was like, yeah, because you don't really fit in to that part of it. So, like, we have the traditions, we have the culture, um, but I didn't grow up with the language. I
Mm.
learned that later on
Right.
in my 20s.
Oh, really? So you didn't
Yeah.
speak I mean, you didn't speak Spanish until your 20s?
Yeah, not until I got into the workplace.
Wow.
Um,
Did it come natural to you?
Well, I knew what certain words and phrases were. My grandparents, they were really hard workers. I'll put this into perspective. They raised all four of their children. They raised,
Yeah.
I want to say, 20 out of 26 of their grandchildren.
Mm.
And then they
Wow.
raised about 15 out of their 20 great grandchildren, myself included.
Wow.
So it was 20 of us in a
Wow.
5-bedroom home. It was multi-generational.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
loved every aspect of it. I have an aunt.
Oh.
Her and I are exactly 3 years apart. So she's 3 years older than me.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
grew up
She's
with
your
my
mom.
aunts and
Wow.
uncles and my cousins, and we all went to high school
Big
together.
family.
A big family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I got to get back to
Man, hats
Gianni.
off to
I
your
got to get back to
grandparents.
Gianni. Hold on.
That's wow.
Gianni, what kind of Hispanic are you?
I love that Kat broke it down like that because I kind of feel that way too. Like I am a Puerto Rican, but you know Puerto Rico is a part of America.
Well, it's
But
Hispanic.
and my biological dad is I believe he's black. So
Okay.
I'm like in between,
You
and I
Puerto
grew
Rican?
up speaking. Yeah, I'm Puerto Rican, and
Here we go.
grew up speaking English and Spanish, and so it's like I don't fit in to either. So I'm just like I guess what they call Afro Latina now.
Afro
That's a thing.
Latina.
Yeah.
With the inflection. Nice.
So,
Right.
so Kat, first question I have to ask you is, can you tell us something that we cannot Google about you? Our audience right now would not be able to pull up Google and say, who is this Kat Henson? What can they not find on you?
I was a production assistant at. I lived in Los Angeles, so and during my
Yeah.
internship, I used to work in the newsroom at,
Oh.
in Burbank at NBC Newsroom.
Ooh.
My one and only job was to hold a boom mic.
Cool.
You paid
Oh,
$10 an
that's
hour,
a long day.
especially for the morning news. Oh my goodness! Just like, yep.
But did you end up with some
All day,
muscles? I
every
mean, you
day.
got to have some muscles, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Arm
but
strength
I was
right
in
there.
college, and part of our requirement, because I have a bachelor's degree in media production,
Mhm.
so a lot of
Nice.
it was you had to put in hours, you had to find an internship, and I was like,
Yeah.
I will take anything I can get, and it was paid, and I was like, when can you find that in
Nice.
LA?
Yeah, it's true.
It's true.
Maybe you get sometimes.
And it's a fun
But
experience.
it was
Like I
getting
was
up at 3 o'clock in the morning, getting it ready,
Ooh.
because it
I'm going
starts
to
at
sleep at 3 in
4:30,
the
the morning
morning.
news, like
Oh my
4:30, and
goodness,
it's on
no.
you don't think it's on a loop, but they have segments. So from like 4:30 until maybe noon, you're really working in
Holding
a
that mic.
good shift, holding that mic.
Wow.
That's a long
That's a
day.
cool experience.
Well,
Wow.
real quick, tell us about
Yeah.
the Sister Sesh Podcast. What inspired you to create, a show that explores cannabis culture and personal growth? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Sister Sesh Podcast is with me and my sister Alicia. We I came out of a really deep dark depression. I needed a project. I didn't want to do it alone, so I called her and I was like, I really want to do a podcast, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what it's about. She's like, well, then let's just get lit and brainstorm. And so
Simple.
I like that.
So we really took our first episode. We recorded a FaceTime, and we just really broke down our weekly conversations of us. And it's a cannabis lifestyle podcast. So we do break out. We go through. Do you know your weed kit? Is my weed kit is different from hers.
Your weed kit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's weed kit.
So it's a puff. It's the etiquette of a puff pass.
Okay.
So-
I've heard of this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Robbie would know
so-
about that. Robbie does.
Yeah. Each generation is different. What you call back in the day, they used to call it like Mary Jane. Now they call it like a tote. There's different names for cannabis. The more like it's integrated into our culture
It is,
and more accepted in
It is.
everything. So
Sure.
what she calls, like I'll call her. I'm like, oh, did you call your connect? And she goes, you mean my plug? And that means that person that you buy weed from. And I was like, what do you mean? What's a plug? And she's like, it's the connect. It's the guy who connects you with weed. I go, yeah, I call it a connect. She goes, no, my generation calls it a plug.
Oh, good.
Like
Yeah.
I go, like a
Okay.
plug in an outlet.
Right.
And she goes, yeah, because you
Ah.
plug it in, he's your plug. And I was like, so we integrate those things.
The slang.
And we just share our
Yes.
life together. So if you ever have seen that 70s show, our premise of our podcast is really that that they're getting high.
Nice.
You know that they are like sesh, but they're having those weird conversations and they're just open. And when we have our guests on, we tell them, just so you know, it's not required to partake, but just know we have beforehand.
So now, just to follow
Nice.
up on that, which famous stoners would you love to sesh
Ooh.
with on the show?
Snoop
We've
Doggy
said it
Dogg.
and we're manifesting it right now. We want Snoop Dogg. Like
course.
that would be
Snoop?
so Snoop, Willie Nelson, and then like Jelly Roll. Those are like our
Willie
top
Nelson.
three. So
What?
Really?
Now,
So what about?
Who's
I've
Jelly
heard
Roll?
that Snoop and Willie
I know I'm
Nelson
old.
have
I know I'm
smoked
old.
together.
Who's Jelly Roll?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Jelly Roll,
Snoop
he's
and-
up and
Snoop
coming.
Willie-
Yeah. Jelly Roll is an up and coming country artist.
Mm.
And he has really taken the country scene by storm.
Okay.
And like
Yeah.
he comes from he was a drug addict. He was a juvenile, adolescent. He was in and out of prison.
Is he
And so
like
he
heavy
write-
set and has tattoos all over him?
Yes, and his wife
I know.
actually is the host of the Dumb Blonde podcast, and she used to
Mm.
be
Oh yeah,
sex worker.
I know that.
so
I know them.
they have a beautiful love story. And
Yeah, I've heard it.
I just really am inspired by them, and they've overcome a lot of similarities and challenges that I have, and I was like, they can make
sure.
it, so can I.
Jose's
amazing.
online. She
And I can
says Snoop
absolutely
Dogg and
confirm that
Seth Rogen.
Snoop.
Ooh,
and,
Seth
Willie
Rogen?
Nelson
Yes,
absolutely
so-
smoked together. Snoop
Yes.
was asked
Really?
who. He was asked if there was anyone who ever smoked him under the table, and at that point he was just like, "Excuse me," he said Willie Nelson, just under the table.
What?
finished him.
Yes, the Snoop pays a guy to roll his blunts. Like that's his job. He's a professional blunt roller.
That is an awesome career.
Yeah, Snoop
I
smokes
get
a
like
lot of
$60K
weed.
a year to roll
Yeah.
his weed. I was like, well, dang.
If you would have said dead or alive, I would have said like Bob Marley, or even Cat Williams smokes weed, and he's a comedian. Cat Williams, that's somebody.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's funny. Just people
Bill
that you
Maher
would laugh
be an
with.
interesting stoner.
I gotta
Bill
admit,
Maher would be
Yeah.
interesting.
I don't really like the smell of
Chappelle.
weed, so I
You can
wouldn't
have
be smoking
edibles.
with nobody.
Yeah.
You can have edibles.
My
You can have
husband-
drinks.
He doesn't like the smell of it, but he will partake in a edible cookie and play his video
Yeah.
game. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, but I'm not doing any sessions
All
with
good.
nobody.
Neo's
I
like,
just,
just making that
Come
clear.
on, because my guy is called the dispensary or the pharmacist. It's all legal.
Yeah,
up here,
okay.
Dispensary.
Little,
Yeah, because it's legal.
Formal.
It's been legal for how long has it been legal?
Who's
Has it
your
always
guy?
been legal in
The
Canada?
clerk. No. So the legalization occurred, I want to say, about 3 years ago.
Okay.
But I've had my medicinal carry card for about a decade.
Yeah, I have my medicinal. I lived in California, and it was just fully state legal. Then when I moved here to Arkansas, I was like, oh, I need my rec. And so I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I guess I'm gonna do that.
But I kind of had a question, Kat. Do you know any like trends or because the cannabis industry is always developing. They have like all types of new things and like I said, new developments. Do you have any, or can you tell us of any trends that you guys would talk about or you find like interesting that you would explore on your podcast, possibly?
I think we explored this in a previous episode. So the sesh boxes are really like up and coming, and every celebrity that that has partaken in any type of cannabis, they will put out their own sesh box. So they'll work with a dispensary or a weed farmer or grower, and they will curate
Yeah.
those certain strands just for them, and then they have like their logos and their brands and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, so like Dwayne Wayne just did his first like luxury sesh box, and we're like, my sister knows more about
Sweet.
sports, and I was like, I don't know who this guy is,
You don't know
and she
Dwayne
was
Wade?
oh yeah, yeah, she's like oh yeah, and so we debated like, is it worth the price? You get a tray, some papers, is it worth the $60?
Huh?
Yeah, just with
Right.
Or
his
you could
face.
do like
Basic,
Seth Rogen
like-
and just start your own company and just have your
Yeah.
own stock, not curate a brand that people are paying for, but here, this is my
Create
company.
your own
All
flavor.
the brands are mine.
So Rob,
Well,
All the
even, like-
brands
you're
are
gonna start growing in your garden, Rob. You're gonna start growing it in your garden.
I didn't know you said Seth Rogen.
Yep.
I didn't know he's smoked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Seth
Seth
Rogen
Rogen.
and
That's Rogan, yeah.
even
You
Snoop
didn't
Dogg, they have
know?
their
I didn't know
own
that.
cannabis companies.
Have you not heard him
The-
laugh?
And
He's an actor, the actor, right? And he has that
Yeah.
funny like Jewish. Okay, I love Seth
Yes.
Rogen.
He started a cannabis company called Houseplant Marijuana, and it's been very successful because he's been associated with that industry throughout his entire movie career. So it was just a natural progression to. He's not going to be
Yeah,
a
if you ever
gin
seen
baron, but
Pineapple
man, he's going to be a weed baron.
Pineapple Express, yes.
Duh.
That was a great
Yeah.
movie. Pineapple
I'm
Express.
So slow.
Yes.
Duh. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Uh,
I
and,
real
and
quick-
even that in culture, there are stoner movies. There are movies that you just can sit there and mindlessly, like, just enjoy
Yeah.
your sesh too, and that's that
Yep.
entertainment. And you'll understand all of that. That's what Cheech and Chong are like mostly famous for in their comedy.
That's true.
We got an online question for you. So, Jacqueline Robinson, has
Where's
climate
Dave,
change
man?
affected the quality of weed for growers?
Interesting.
I'm not quite sure, but I would assume so. A lot of like more industrial growing is done indoors in warehouses.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
So
Okay.
under a controlled environment, especially if it's going to dispensaries and everything. I remember when back in 2014, I moved up to Northern California and I lived on a weed farm for a year.
Mm.
And
Oh,
it was
wow.
trimming season. It was trimming season. You've traded room and board, and you trimmed, and we wore masks, and we were, it was all federally legal and regulated. So we had to
Oh,
have
cool.
gloves, and we had to have masks on, and we had to just sit there, and it was 12-hour shifts,
Wow.
sitting there trimming it,
Wow.
making sure it's nice and pretty.
Wow.
We had to weigh
Wow,
everything.
Wow.
Yeah, and so you see the cultivation of it too. Each strain has a different growing process depending on what it is, and
Yeah.
even the seedling process. Even now, if you smoke, most people try to keep the little seeds that come out of their nugs because then they can repurpose them and then they can grow them.
Grow their
Um,
own.
Oh.
They
Yes.
can grow that. Oh, that
I've
same
grown one in my
strain.
closet in college. I've grown a plant in my closet in college.
Really?
Wow.
I've heard of
So
people
you
growing
are
them
truly
themselves
a
in the
weed
closet.
expert.
Connoisseur. Yeah.
No, I'm more of a I'm
Cannabis
just a basic
connoisseur.
stoner.
Basic story.
Stoner girl.
All right, so all this talk about weed's been fun, but let's switch gears just slightly. So you in your podcast, I was listening to your podcast, you're really open about your mental health journey. how it led you
Yeah.
to podcasting, and how it's been transformative for you. But can you speak about, your journey, your mental health journey, and, how it's been a struggle for you? Because we talk about mental
Um,
health often on this show, because,
okay.
it's important to all of us. We all have our things that we're dealing with. And um, I'm just curious what your experience has been.
I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the age of 5. I
Wow.
had a
Oh, wow.
I am a child of an addict,
Mhm.
and a lot of that reconstruction, and my lifestyle growing up was, my family's part of gangs and that kind of thing, and my grandparents really struggled to kind of shelter us and protect us from those things.
Mm.
Um, my uncles were always into drugs and selling and distributing
Mhm.
and doing whatever they wanted. It was a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
So for us growing up, it was like we knew the cops were coming. Like we knew the house was going to get raided before they ever showed up. We
Mm.
knew that things
Yeah.
were going to
Expected.
be that way. So I when my father died, I had a mental breakdown and I dealt with suicide for the very first time, which is very hard for a 5-year-old. How does a 5-year-old comprehend that they don't want to be here
Oh.
anymore? So I've been in and out of therapy throughout my whole life, and then I want to say 4 years ago,
Mm.
I got diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. I
Mhm.
checked myself into a mental hospital and I was there for about a year.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, I want to get to the root of this. Like, I'm not leaving here until you diagnose me. Like, and then I was married prior, so I went through a huge divorce.
Mm.
And
Oh
I
my
moved
God.
back to California and I found a really great psychologist. And that's when she diagnosed me. And she was like, you know what? None of these psychotics that you're taking is doing it. Let's try cannabis. And I was like, no, wait, nope. I was like, nope. You know my
Yeah.
history. You know, um, addiction runs within me. I've struggled with my own addiction. I'm not going to touch it. And she's like, well, let's try it. And I've integrated that and have healthy boundaries with it
Has it
through the
helped though?
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It helps a lot with the auditory hallucinations. So if
Nice.
you don't know what schizoaffective disorder is, bipolar disorder
I know
and
bipolar.
schizophrenia. So
Mm.
I have the mood swings, the highs and the lows of
Mm.
bipolar 1.
Okay.
Bipolar.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So when my highs are I'm like, I'm great, I'm doing good, I'm a workaholic, I pick up too many projects, and then something small and inconvenient will just be that catalyst. I'm like, all
Mm.
right, I'm a piece of crap. I don't feel loved and valued and
Mm.
appreciated. And then I also hear voices. So that's where the cannabis comes in. It calms, and then
Those
lessens the
symptoms.
PTSD of certain traumas.
Wow. Okay.
Wow,
Wow.
Kat. Thank you for
Wow.
sharing that. It's very heavy. Thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
so
Sorry.
what is that experience like
No.
when because my brother was bipolar. I think my mother was undiagnosed bipolar. I'm just curious, what is the experience like when you are hallucinating? I mean, are you aware that you're hallucinating, or is it just
To a certain extent. So
okay?
um there are, when I'm very manic. So when I'm in a manic episode, and what I've learned is manic episodes aren't just like weeks and months, they can be years. There are those crazy, like, you just don't care about the consequences of your actions. You're just going to do what you want to do, and you don't care about the
Mm.
repercussions. I've had seasons and dark
Right.
seasons like that, and then that's where the hallucination is, where it's like those voices. I have someone telling me in my ear, and the best way I will describe it, it's like a radio in my head.
Mhm.
It
Mm.
depends on what's
Okay.
really I'm going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So if things are good, they're like at a very low, like white noise. If my
Mhm.
anxiety is really high, it's very drowning. Like I can't focus.
Okay.
Even if my children are yelling and they're playing around and I'm still hearing other things, I will have to tell my partner, "Hey, I need a minute." Like, I need to step away.
Yeah.
Wow.
I need a
Absolutely.
minute. But I've had to learn to communicate those needs. And that's really, really difficult to communicate, like, hey, I need a minute.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
overstimulated. I'm not all here. And
It's
it's okay to say that I'm not okay.
it's got to be
Yeah.
tough to
Yeah.
have children, and trying to deal with your mental health the way you are. It's got to be tough.
Yeah, I've got a lot of backlash because they're like, well, if you smoke, then you're not really a present parent. I was like, no, you have to understand, I have to smoke to be a
Mm.
In
present
order to be
parent. I
present.
am a better,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm
That's
better,
interesting.
even
It's
if
different in
I
this
smoked in the
scenario.
morning and through, it's now the afternoon and we're chilling at the pool, I feel better because I'm more present. I'm
Exactly.
Yeah.
able to,
You're
have those
there.
things. Yeah. As to if there are days where I decide, I don't need it and I'm fine, I have those days too, where I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna have a sesh today. I'm just gonna do me and figure out life and manage with other coping skills.
Yeah.
I journal. I
Nice.
use
Good.
my podcast. My
Yeah.
sister and I have
That's a
like
great
a
outlet.
kind of talk. Yeah, our podcast we've created has been very loving and safe space between us.
Nice.
And I think it's gotten us back to building a better relationship with
Nice.
Alicia and I.
Nice. That's
Oh,
awesome.
Oh, very
that's
nice.
wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was actually going to touch on that because you mentioned that it's a safe space for you. And I'm sure for your listeners as well, as we talked about. Do you have any, or can you think of any memorable episodes or a specifically memorable episode that maybe you kept or your sister kept or your audience kept with you?
I would think it would be one of our last recent episode. My sister officially came out as gay,
Mm.
and
Oh, wow.
she
Yes.
through that process, we were having conversations, and through that process she was taking our audience through, like, hey, I think I'm bisexual, and I'm like, okay, cool, what's that mean for you? And then she's like, well, no, now I
Right.
have this friend and we kissed and I don't know what that means.
Mm.
And so she's taking our audience through that. And so she was really afraid to come out to her father because he's just a traditional Hispanic,
Mm.
man.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they don't approve. They're very like macho, and
Machismo.
yeah, he's a very
Yeah.
machismo. And, she had already came out to my mom and I, and we're like, all right, cool. What's her name? Does she make you happy? That's all that really matters. And so that episode, she really deep dived into, he kicked her out of the house. He told her
Mm.
to leave. He couldn't approve
Oh.
of it. And I think it was a good episode for me to be like, all right, I'm the big sister now.
Mm.
I have to, and I was able to explain to her from a parent's perspective too,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we got to display, we're 8 years apart. So when she starts to enter a chapter of her life, I just ended that chapter of my
Yeah.
life.
Yes,
And
exactly.
now so she's in her 20s now, figuring out her, and I'm in my late 20s, beginning my 30s, and I'm raising
Yes.
kids, and I've already been through multiple relationships and things to get to where I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I just wanted to give you a minute to kind of share what's happening with the Crescent Media. Crescent Media,
Yeah.
your business venture. Let's talk about that real quick.
Nice.
So I fell in love with podcasting, and a lot of my audience would DM me and on Instagram and TikTok. They're like, "How'd you grow this so fast?" And I was like, I've been a content creator for 12 years. I
Yeah.
took a good 8-year hiatus from that.
Mhm.
I did YouTube. I went to conventions. I went to Anime Expo. Like, I was, living that. And then when I got into my first marriage, it got very toxic and abusive.
Mm.
So I left the internet, and then I showed up, and I was like, all right, I'm on my second marriage. I have kids, and this is my life now.
Nice.
Back.
This is like second nature for you, so that's awesome.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very
So
nice,
I
Kat.
started an online course, and then I realized that boomed from there, and I was like, I can really use the degree that I worked so hard for,
Yep.
to
I like that.
use. Yeah. And for me, I live in a small town in Arkansas. So it's the industry is not here.
Right.
Like,
Of course
Right.
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Arkansas, no. Well, all right. Well, thanks so much, Kat, for joining us. Unfortunately, we are out of time now. But
Thank you,
please just give any last words you have, and just be sure to tell everyone where they can find you and the Sister Sesh podcast.
okay, so first you can find us on our network, podsnetwork.com.
Yes.
Yes.
Pods Network, PODZ.
Yes. Yep. We are part of the same network, also Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much everywhere you can find your podcasts. And
Yep.
just come join the sesh with us.
Yeah, the Sister Sesh podcast. It's a lot of fun, so you got to check them out. Thank you
Sounds
again, Kat, for joining us. We really do
for having
appreciate
me.
your time.
Thank you.
We got to have you
Kat.
back sometime. We have to give you, maybe
Oh,
bring you
yeah,
back as a
definitely.
guest host. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kat. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon. All right. I did it again.
So we're gonna have to.